I'm sure most of you have read the recent developers notes, so where exactly are we headed? Let's find out.
7K Dreamer Plays.
Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm finally done with military duties and ready to take on everything that is about to come. And before you go shooting off with your criticisms and comments about a dying game, please hear me out at least. So the 4th anniversary has been given the title 7 Knights Reboot. Just to be clear, Korea server has gotten their reboot, so this is not just something that was set for the new world server. Clearly within Netmarble, they plan for a complete overhaul of the game inside out. Before I actually talk about the changes in the new world, I want to mention some changes done in the Korea server which we may possibly get as well. Big shout out to the fellow player Sky Icing who did a Twitch stream and translated all the patch notes. This is what I have summarized. Number 1, guaranteed crit and guaranteed block mechanics are removed. Everything will go by percentage, so 100% crit or 100% block only. Number 2, debuff immunities are removed as well. Debuffs will land based on how high the cast rate is versus the resist rate, so there will always be a chance to be CC'd. That said, they have precisely included the percentage of the chance of casting, so there is no longer vague descriptions such as at a certain rate but 50% chance to stun enemies for 2 turns, for example. Number 3, hero remakes. Most of them have their damage output numbers changed, mostly lower. However, every hero will be getting a big stat buff. Focus will shift to main stats, especially HP, which can scale into the 50,000 to 70,000 range. HP shields and healing effects will also reach 10,000 and 15,000 HP ranges. So this also leads to a rise in insane fixed damage numbers, which I totally predicted in my previous video. Number 4, awakening gauges now have a stage count. So some gauges will have 5 stages while some have 10 stages to charge up. So skills which do increase awakening gauges will have clear statements about how many stages the increase will be. Number 5, all stat increase caps are removed, including damage increase, defense increase, attack increase. With that said, buff values and durations will also be completely changed. For example, Myth Eileen in Korea, which could boost physical attack of allies by 120%, will now only boost 30%. So manage your expectations starting right now. Number 6, formation buffs will be revamped. In Korea, they decrease formation buffs from 100% to 30% for both the defensive and offensive formations. Number 7, certain unique effects of heroes are completely removed, so skill sets will become very straightforward now. Some effects like exploit vulnerability are removed in Korea server. No more damage alleviation as well. It will simply be damage decrease. So basically a very massive simplification in skill sets, especially for heroes who are not Mythical Awakened. This is probably to set up for more OP Mythical Awakened forms in time to come. And if you saw this image I posted on my Facebook page earlier on, you can see that it's actually an insane rebalance where you can even use regular Awakened heroes again against Mythical Awakened heroes and will still win depending on how you gear your hero and depending on their stats. So that is exactly the main goal of the reboot. That is to bring players back to the roots of battling where you actually rely on stats and equipment and less on RNG. And you can also deal damage right away from the start of the battle without having to continuously reduce shields and buff durations. And rightfully this is good. Why so? Because can you imagine if nothing was done to this? Eventually heroes will be released with increasing number of void shields, turn immunities, buff reductions. Honestly, it will only be about more and more numbers, and does it all work the same way? Yes. The idea of the battling system will remain unchanged and relatively also the same. Enemy has 5 turn immunity, I have 4 turn buff reduction. Enemy has 7 turn immunity, I have 6 turn buff reduction, so on and so forth. So the focus is massively shifted to hero stats, and it will all come down to how much can your hero deal and how much can your hero receive. So there are 8 important base stats to look at: attack, defense, HP, speed, crit rate, lethal rate, counter rate, and block rate. All these will come into greater importance with the new revamp of the battle system, with lethal and block getting significant changes which I covered in my previous video. Which brings me to talk about the so-called nerfs you saw in the developers notes, which really are not nerfs after you understand the bigger picture. The biggest reason is that they do not want stats to go beyond 100%. In this case, take crit rate for example. We have one +10 awakened weapon which will give 22%. Note that this is not the final amount because you still have to consider what happens after Mythical Awakening the item. Could it increase to 25% or 30%? Jewels will give 20% instead of 40%, Limit Break will give 10% instead of 30%, Accessories will give 10% instead of 20%. So cumulatively, crit rate via these sources will only add up to 84% excluding item Mythical Awakening. What about the remaining 16%? Remember that the developers have not revealed any information about mastery changes and the hero remix. With these taken into account, it could be possible to reach 100% crit rate or more even though the cap is at 100%. In fact, with this system whereby everything is capped within 0 to 100% of a stat, it streamlines the gameplay for players and at the same time also make it pretty strategy based. Since you only have a limited amount of slots for jewels, accessories and traits, then it means you can only afford to build and boost a hero in a certain stat. So this is where equipment composition and team composition come into play along with masteries, guild buffs, revamp exclusive items, etc. How do you put together a team based on the new hero revamps along with the new item changes to ensure your team's efficiency? So it is really a rebalancing and shifting of numbers and not a nerf. But people really take everything at face value and immediately conclude drop in stats equal nerf equal bad dying game. There is a lot left unsaid, and making the judgment at this point if something is entirely bad or good is rather inconclusive. And I personally find some of the comments very hypocritical. Let's be really honest. In terms of PvP, only a small, and I mean really small percentage of player base will use World Boss jewels, and even 4-lot jewels, and definitely not crit and lethal weapons in arena except for your defense leader sometimes. So does the change really affect that much? Are you guys actually telling me that you use basic attack increase, skill cooldown, or even recovery skill jewels for most of your team? I don't think so. Block armor is also getting an overall mechanic buff after the reboot, so what is there to complain? For sure, in terms of PvE, there will be a lot of extra considerations now due to the reliance of lethal and crit, but that is to be examined only after the update because we don't know for sure how the remix will be like. The parts of the developers' notes that are debatable, I feel, are the accessory changes and some, I repeat, some parts of the limit break changes. Again, keep in mind that everything is kept within a 0 to 100% range. One of the biggest and hugely impacted accessories are the crit, damage and evasion accessory, which were both initially at 30% but will be changed to 10%. Not sure if the substat levels will be improved or maxed out at 14%, which seems a little pathetic, especially for evasion, but definitely this will have a big impact because I'm sure many players have already built several 34% evasion substats. And yes, the Willful and Guardian Rings effects are changing. Looking at the new effect of the Willful Ring, which by the way has been out of meta for so long and only valid on Sylvester Teal and maybe against some guild dungeon bosses, it is indeed identical to the passive which Palinus has. However, they did not state how many times a hero can heal from this effect, but coupled with the new Isabella's Crimson Blood, we can potentially have a new deadly tanky combo right there. Or if you couple this with a Vigor or Lifesteal, insane healing right there. I think this ring will fit on heroes which have a decent bulk for sure. Pairing this with the new block rate mechanics is also going to be pretty viable. The new Guardian Ring provides nullification for 3 turns, so this is not the same 3-turn immunity which our existing Willful Ring gives. It is a nullification, which means it is still a void shield but for 3 turns and even piercing skills won't get through. And before you start screaming your angst about this seemingly ridiculous change, remember the point again is to make battles quick and rely on damage as a core basis. At this point, the turn-based progression is still rather vague, so we will see how it actually goes after the reboot. The concern the community has right now is that if turns go by so quickly, how will we deal with guild dungeon bosses, especially Reboot in 9.15, which converts our hero's HP to 1. Guardian Ring will only provide immunity for a very short period of time. In Korea's server, the Reboot removed all convert to 1 HP skills and made them reduce HP by 50%. This is also due to the huge HP boost, so hopefully we get the same thing. On this note, I really hope the developers also consider the PvE aspect of the game. All these changes are largely focused on the PvP mechanics, and if your team doesn't really look at PvP enemy skill sets, the game will still be unbalanced. And if anyone from Netmarble is watching this, the red key discount is awesome, so can we please keep it? Or at least make it 5 keys as a permanent new cost, cause it's really good. Another shocker is the revamp of 4 Gyarados and Isabella accessories, especially the Evil Eye. For your information, HP caps are removed from 95% of heroes following the KR Reboot, so there is no longer a need to deal damage exceeding HP caps. Any need to freak out then? Not at all. What I'm more concerned about is how much effectiveness we will get from the new Evil Eye. At maximum, you can ignore 500 flat stat points of defense. Flat stat. We don't know how much percentage defense plays in the battle and in damage calculation, but what we do know is that after the reboot, 1 plus 10 Awakened Dragon Armor is going to give a defense stat boost of 568. So technically, a maxed out Evil Eye is going to render 1 armor's worth of defense completely useless. Of course, you can stack on blue jewels with flat stats and defense accessories, 10% increase to boost your hero, which is probably one of the many new considerations you will have for hero equipping. I cannot assure how effective the Evil Eye could be because it requires actual testing and battle opportunity, but one thing to bear in mind is that skills which ignore defense will officially completely ignore defense after the reboot. So in that case, does the Evil Eye make sense for heroes with those skills? Probably not so much. Gyarados' Loyalty, Velocity and Isabella's Crimson Blood are also given brand new effects, and they are pretty interesting really. Taunt for 7 turns could be very viable on a tanky hero or a hero equipped with the Guardian Ring. This has the potential to be paired with even defense, evasion or of course Willful Ring too, all for the purpose of added bulk. I think Taunt in Arena is still a very new concept because aside from Awakened Rudy, we actually have never had that. Height from Velocity is going to be something which currently Atalanta, Ray and Clemens have. Basically it prevents the hero from being targeted and also he or she can't be debuffed. So 7 turns is pretty significant and can potentially be the next meta ring. Isabella's Crimson Blood is also another great change in my opinion. Piercing damage reduction is currently kind of meh, but the new change makes this a great accessory for both PvP and PvE. Lastly would be the limit break changes. Again, let's just be honest, apart from lethal and counter, do people really even use crit and block that much? I think the rebalance with the biggest impact are everything on page 3 and 4. Page 3 and 4, especially page 3, is the main page for PvE DPSs. This huge change is definitely going to affect damage output greatly, which leads back to the thought. Are they trying to make Guild Dungeon, Guild Raid and Raid modes even tougher to beat to compensate for the lack of a challenging PvE mode currently? Or will masteries and new hero skill sets actually help to compensate for these losses? And hopefully we will get more heroes which let us do increased damage against certain enemy types, as that will really shake up the various team compositions. I think accuracy rate and debuff cast rate changes are also pretty significant, but accuracy rate will still be greater than evasion rate at base level, so that is checked. Meanwhile, debuff cast rate getting that huge drop too. This could be in line with the new percentage based casting rates put in place like in Korea server as mentioned at the beginning of the video, so these numbers will stack upon whatever base cast rate percentage there is. So if you made it through this video, I hope it has given you many things to think about, or rather have let you keep an open mind about things instead. Hopefully this video helped clear things up. Do give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I have a lot planned for the rest of the month. Thank you so much and see you.